The Clone Wars never truly paused. Even during the 6 months Earth called a ceasefire, the machinery kept turning. Palpatine kept accumulating emergency powers. Count Dooku kept recruiting systems. The inhibitor chips kept sitting dormant in 3 million clone skulls, waiting for a frequency only one man in the galaxy knew how to broadcast. The Harvester threat had done something nobody anticipated. It had shown the galaxy that Earth mattered, not as a strategic asset to be claimed or a primitive world to be managed, but as a variable, unpredictable, innovative, and deeply dangerously committed to its own survival. Palpatine had watched all of it: the ceasefire, the Mandalorian alliance, the cyber division cracking separatist encryption, Dr. Chen deflecting plasma with her bare hands, the George Lucas transmitting Force visions through back channels that the Supreme Chancellor had not yet identified. He had watched and calculated and waited, because Palpatine had spent 30 years learning that the most dangerous threats were not the ones that announced themselves with armies. They were the ones that grew quietly in uncharted space, outside the Force's reach, outside the Republic's awareness, outside his plan. The Clone Wars resumed on a Tuesday by Earth's calendar, and this time the Chancellor was not waiting for the war to end. He was ending it himself. The Senate session was classified at a level that technically didn't exist in the Republic's public charter. Not confidential, not restricted, not even the highest standard security designation that appeared in official documentation. This was something below all of that, in the bureaucratic sub-basement where things were filed not to be retrieved, but to be buried, labeled with designation codes that referenced other designation codes that referenced nothing at all. Palpatine had developed this architecture over years, each layer of obscurity added so gradually that the senators who helped build it had never seen the whole structure they were constructing. 41 senators attended, not the full body, not the Security Committee, not any official subgroup that would generate a quorum record or a meeting transcript. 41 senators selected with the precision of a man who had spent 3 decades learning exactly which people in any room would hear what he needed them to hear and repeat what he needed repeated and forget what he needed forgotten. The Palpatine stood at the center of the chamber with his hands clasped and his expression carrying the particular quality of concerned gravity that he had perfected over the entirety of his political career. The face of a man shouldering burdens he would never ask others to share, but was sharing anyway, reluctantly, because the situation demanded it. The Earth situation, he began, has developed in ways that require our most careful attention. Senator Tal Merrick of Kalevala leaned forward. The Harvester threat has been addressed, Chancellor. Our joint defense protocols with Earth proved effective. The ceasefire held for 6 months with no significant... The Harvester threat, Palpatine interrupted gently, is the least of what concerns me. The room settled. He had learned decades ago that interruption was most effective when done softly. Loud interruption created resistance. Soft interruption created attention. What concerns me, he continued, moving to the holographic display at the chamber's center, is this. The display showed George Lucas, not dramatically, not surrounded by security personnel or positioned in some context that framed him as dangerous. Just a man sitting in an Earth conference room, speaking to a small group of Earth military advisors, his hands moving as he described something. The footage was surveillance quality, slightly grainy, the kind of image that communicated it had been obtained at considerable effort and therefore represented considerable commitment. A filmmaker, Senator Dodd observed, from Earth. A filmmaker, Palpatine agreed. No, who has been experiencing detailed Force visions of Republic military operations for approximately 50 years. He paused, including operations that have not yet occurred. The silence had a different quality now. He knows about Order 66, Palpatine said simply, not as a concept, as a mechanism. He has described the inhibitor chip architecture in his visions with sufficient accuracy that Earth's cyber division has begun treating it as a research target. He looked around the chamber. If they crack that encryption, and based on what we've seen from their technical teams, they will crack it. 3 million clone troopers receive information that compromises the Republic's most critical emergency protocol. Then we retrieve the filmmaker, Senator Philo said. Bring him to Coruscant. Ye assess the extent of his knowledge. He has been transmitting his visions to General Kenobi through a channel we identified 4 days ago, Palpatine said. Everything he knows, Kenobi now knows, or will shortly. Another silence, longer. What are you proposing, Chancellor? Merrick asked carefully. Palpatine looked at the image of Lucas on the display, at the man sitting in his conference room, describing impossible things to Earth military advisors who were writing all of it down. I am proposing, he said, that Earth's status as a protected sovereign world requires immediate reassessment. The Senate granted that designation based on incomplete information. We did not know at the time that Earth harbored an individual with Force-sensitive precognitive abilities, actively transmitting classified Republic intelligence to field commanders. He paused. That changes the calculation considerably. Reclassification would require a full Senate vote, Philo said. The political cost after the Harvester defense, after the broadcast, which is why we are having this conversation in this room, Palpatine said, rather than the full chamber. He let that land. 41 senators sat with it. There is also the matter of Dr. Sarah Chen, Palpatine continued, pulling up a second image. The plasma deflection incident recorded from 3 angles by Republic intelligence monitoring equipment. The round moving at combat velocity, Chen's hand moving to block it without apparent awareness. The round stopping. Untrained Force sensitivity emerging in an Earth national, an individual who is already embedded in Earth's planetary defense architecture, who has direct access to the hybrid weapons programs and the cyber division. He looked at the room. An untrained Force sensitive in that position, with that access developing her abilities without Jedi guidance, is dangerous, Dodd finished. Is unpredictable, Palpatine corrected, with the careful precision of a man who understood that dangerous created sympathy and unpredictable created fear. The Jedi Order has protocols for situations like this. Those protocols exist for good reasons. He did not say what he was proposing be done about Dr. Chen. He didn't need to. 41 senators left the chamber 40 minutes later, each carrying a slightly different version of the same understanding. None of them able to point to a specific moment when they had agreed to anything that could be called an order. That was the architecture. That was how it had always worked. Palpatine stood alone in the empty chamber afterward and looked at the holographic display, still showing Earth from orbit. Beautiful blue, inhabited by 8 billion humans who had spent 6 months believing they had won something. He studied it with the patient attention of a man who had been planning for decades and for whom 6 months was simply the time between one move and the next. The Force did not touch Earth. That had always been the interesting part. The Force could not show him what they would do, could not give him the threads of probability that he pulled to manage every other significant variable in the galaxy. The Earth was genuinely opaque to him in a way that nothing else had ever been. 8 billion humans whose choices he could not anticipate through Sith foresight, whose responses he could not model through Force perception, whose fundamental nature existed outside every tool he had spent his life developing. He had been managing that opacity for 6 months. Now he was going to eliminate it. He deactivated the display, walked to the viewport, looked out at Coruscant's permanent artificial dawn. Somewhere in Earth's solar system, a filmmaker with Force visions was transmitting classified intelligence to a Jedi general. Somewhere in Geneva, a physicist with emergent Force sensitivity was working in a weapons program that had already produced innovations that made experienced military officers uncomfortable. Somewhere on a Republic cruiser, Captain Rex was reading damage reports and following orders without knowing that following orders was precisely what was going to kill him. All of it was manageable. Everything was always manageable if you moved before it became unmanageable. He turned from the viewport and walked to his private office to compose a transmission to Republic intelligence that would not appear in any official record and would be carried by a courier whose existence was likewise not officially recorded. In Geneva, 1,200 light-years away and entirely unaware, George Lucas sat down at his desk and began writing down the details of a new vision. His hands were shaking. He wrote faster. The vision came at 0340 Geneva time, which Lucas had stopped finding meaningful after the 3rd consecutive week of pre-dawn Force transmissions. He had learned, in the months since first contact, that the visions didn't operate on human schedules. They didn't respect sleep cycles or meeting commitments or the basic biological requirement that a 62-year-old man needed approximately 7 hours of unconsciousness to function at the level Earth's Planetary Defense Council currently expected of him. The Force, or whatever mechanism was routing these images through his sleeping brain, appeared entirely indifferent to his personal logistics. He sat at the desk in his Geneva quarters and wrote without stopping. The vision had shown him Palpatine's office, not the public office. Not the Grand Senate chamber with its sweeping views of Coruscant's endless cityscape. The private one deeper in the building, where the furniture was simpler and the light came from sources that felt deliberately chosen to make a room feel intimate rather than powerful. Lucas had seen this room before in his earlier visions, the room where the most important conversations of the Clone Wars happened without any official record. In the vision, Anakin was sitting in the chair across from Palpatine. This was not unusual. Lucas had seen dozens of variations of this meeting over the years. Palpatine and Anakin in that room, the older man leaning forward with an expression of fatherly concern. the younger man's face carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who had been at war for 3 years and was running out of places to put the weight of it. What was different about this vision was the timestamp. Lucas had been seeing visions of events that had already occurred, events that were occurring, and events that existed in probability space, futures that might happen depending on choices not yet made. He had developed an imprecise but functional sense for which category any given vision belonged to. The ones that felt solid and heavy were the past. The ones that felt like watching film were the present. The ones that felt like standing at the edge of something were the future. This one felt like standing at the edge, close, immediate, not years away. In the vision, Palpatine was describing Padme dying in childbirth, not as a prophecy, not as a warning, as a certainty delivered with the quiet authority of a man who had access to information others lacked. His voice was gentle, measured, precisely calibrated to land in the specific gap between Anakin's fear and Anakin's hope. He was not frightening the young Jedi. He was confirming what Anakin already feared, which was worse because confirmation felt like knowledge, and knowledge felt like something you had to act on. Lucas watched Anakin's face in the vision, watched the moment when the fear, which had been a private thing Anakin carried alone, became a shared thing, and watched how that sharing, which should have been a relief, instead became a trap. Because Palpatine wasn't sharing it to reduce the weight. He was sharing it to attach himself to it, to become, in Anakin's mind, the only person who understood what Anakin was actually carrying. And then Palpatine said the words, "The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities, some considered to be unnatural." Lucas stopped writing. He sat with that sentence for a moment. The way you sit with something you've heard before and are only now understanding fully. He had written those words into a screenplay 20 years ago, in a different context, in a version of events he'd thought was fiction. He had revised them, polished them, argued about them with editors. He had never understood, until this moment, that he hadn't invented them. He had remembered them. He picked up his pen and wrote faster. The vision continued, Anakin asking questions, Palpatine answering with the precision of a man who had rehearsed this conversation so many times it had become instinct. Each answer designed not to inform but to deepen the dependency. Each piece of information calibrated to make Anakin feel that understanding the dark side was the same as having the tools to save someone he loved. Lucas watched Anakin standing at the edge of the choice, and then the vision shifted, the way visions sometimes did, cutting sideways through probability rather than forward through time. And he saw a different version, the same room, the same conversation, but Anakin's expression was different, still exhausted, still carrying the weight. But underneath the fear, there was something else present, something that hadn't been there in the other version. He had seen it before. He had seen it on Earth, specifically in the face of the Secretary General when Tarkin's ultimatum was broadcast, the face of someone who recognized manipulation because they had already been shown what manipulation looked like from the outside, who could see the architecture of what was being done to them because someone had taken the time to walk them through it before they were standing in the middle of it. In this version, Anakin looked at Palpatine and said nothing for a long moment. And then he said, "I know what you're doing." The vision ended. Lucas sat in the dark of his Geneva quarters with his notebook and 12 pages of handwriting and the specific kind of clarity that only arrived at 0340 when every social filter had been dissolved by exhaustion and 3 months of cosmic horror. He knew what the vision meant. The first version was the original timeline, the one he had seen 50 years ago as a young man in California, having dreams he thought were creative inspiration. Anakin falling, the Republic burning, Order 66 executing with mechanical precision across a galaxy that never saw it coming. The second version was the branch. Something had changed the branch. He didn't need the Force to tell him what. He had watched it happen from a conference room in Geneva, a planet refusing to be conquered. 8 billion humans demonstrating what it looked like when you recognized the shape of a trap before you were inside it. Anakin had been watching Earth for months, had absorbed something from the watching, even if he hadn't named it. But the branch was not guaranteed. The branch was still a probability, and probabilities collapsed under pressure. And Palpatine was applying pressure. Lucas looked at the transmission equipment in the corner of his quarters, the channel to Obi-Wan that Republic intelligence had identified 4 days ago. He knew they'd identified it because Chen had flagged the monitoring signatures on his line, which was itself an indication of how thoroughly Earth's cyber division had learned to read the Republic's surveillance architecture. He needed a new channel, and he needed to transmit everything in the next 12 pages before the timeline made the second version impossible. He crossed the room to the terminal and spent 4 minutes doing something Earth's cyber division had taught him, which involved 3 proxy relays, a frequency hop pattern borrowed from separatist slicing techniques, and a destination address that was not Obi-Wan's official Republic comlink, but a secondary frequency Obi-Wan had given him verbally, never in writing, on the day the Harvester fleet retreated. The channel opened. Lucas began transmitting. He described the vision in full. The office, the conversation, the 2 versions of the same moment, the specific words Palpatine used, and the specific sequence in which he used them, and the gap they were designed to fill in Anakin's psychology. He described the timestamp, the sense of proximity, the feeling that this was not years away, but weeks, possibly days. He described the second version and what had changed it. Then he sat back and looked at what he had written and added one final note, which was not a vision, but was something he had understood, sitting in this room at 0340 with 12 pages of handwriting in front of him. The first version fails because Anakin is alone with it. Nobody who knows him well enough to see what's happening is in the room when it happens. He carries the fear by himself until Palpatine becomes the only person who knows he's carrying it, and then Palpatine owns the fear. The second version works because someone got there first, not to remove the fear, you can't remove it, but to sit with it alongside him so that Palpatine's offer of understanding isn't the first time anyone has understood. Someone needs to have that conversation with Anakin before Palpatine does. You have very little time. He sent the transmission. Then he sat back in his chair and realized his hands had stopped shaking. Not because he was less afraid. He was considerably more afraid than he had been 30 minutes ago. But there was something clarifying about having done the specific thing that needed to be done, rather than carrying the knowledge of what needed to be done. Outside the window, Geneva was beginning to lighten toward dawn. Somewhere in orbit, Republic intelligence was monitoring his communications and flagging anomalies for a courier that would reach Palpatine's office through channels that had no official record. Somewhere on a Republic cruiser, Obi-Wan Kenobi's secondary comlink was receiving a transmission from a filmmaker in Switzerland who had spent 50 years accidentally remembering the future. Lucas hoped it was enough. He thought about the Secretary General standing in front of cameras 2 months ago, telling a galaxy of trillions that Earth would not go quietly into occupation, her voice steady, her hands not shaking, her entire bearing communicating the particular quality of someone who had decided to be exactly who they were, regardless of the consequences. He hoped Anakin had been watching closely. He thought Anakin had been watching closely. He closed his notebook and went to make coffee because the Planetary Defense Council meeting started in 4 hours, and the future, however it resolved, was going to require someone to have slept at least partially. The plasma round moved at 847 meters per second. Chen knew the exact number because she had checked the weapon specifications herself that morning, the way she checked every specification for every piece of equipment used in joint training exercises. It was a habit she had developed in the first weeks after first contact, when the gap between what Earth's engineers thought they understood and what Republic technology actually did had produced 3 lab accidents, 1 diplomatic incident, and a strongly worded memo from Bo-Katan about the difference between theoretical familiarity and practical competence. Know your equipment, know its tolerances, know exactly what it does when it fails. 847 meters per second, standard training round, reduced yield, designed to register a hit without penetrating Mandalorian Beskar. Now, against unarmored human tissue at close range, it would have removed her hand at the wrist. She did not know she had moved until after the round had stopped. That was the part she kept returning to in the 40 minutes between the incident and the moment Bo-Katan pulled her into a side room off the training floor, with an expression that communicated several things simultaneously, the most prominent of which was that this conversation was not going to be comfortable for either of them. She hadn't decided to block it. There had been no conscious assessment of the trajectory, no calculation of interception geometry, no moment of deliberate choice. One of the Mandalorian specialists had fumbled the weapon during a demonstration. A genuine accident, not a drill. And the round had discharged in Chen's direction, and then her hand had been in front of it, and then the round had been on the floor. She had felt something, not pain, not the physical sensation of impact. Something else, something that had no adequate framework in her existing vocabulary, because her existing vocabulary had been built to describe phenomena that operated through understood mechanisms. This had operated through a mechanism she did not understand. It had felt like reaching for something in a dark room and finding it where you expected it to be, except she hadn't known she was reaching and hadn't known what she expected. Bo-Katan had been watching from 12 meters away, the Mandalorian's expression when Chen finally processed it. was not the shock she would have expected from someone who had just witnessed a physicist deflect a live round with her bare hand. It was something closer to recognition, the face of someone seeing a thing they had seen before and been waiting to see again. "Sit down," Bo-Katan said. They were in a storage room off the main training floor. Republic manufactured equipment crates stacked against one wall, Earth fabrication components along another. The hybrid nature of the room was so normalized now that Chen didn't notice it anymore, which itself said something about how thoroughly the last 6 months had rearranged what counted as normal. "I'm not injured," Chen said. "I know. Sit down anyway." Chen sat. She looked at her right hand. It looked exactly the same as it always had. She turned it over, examined the palm, found nothing. The round was still on the floor 6 rooms away. She had a brief, intense desire to go retrieve it and run spectroscopic analysis on whether it had been physically altered. "How long?" Bo-Katan asked. "I don't know what you're—" "Dr. Chen." The Mandalorian's voice was not unkind. It was the voice of someone who had learned that directness was a form of respect and that softening things people needed to hear clearly was its own category of cruelty. "How long have things been moving when you didn't intend them to move?" Chen looked at her, said nothing for a moment, then, 3 months, approximately." Bo-Katan nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already calculated. "Small things first," Chen continued, "because apparently they were doing this. Apparently this was the conversation they were having in a storage room at 0900 on a Thursday. A stylus rolling toward me on a table when I was distracted. A door opening a half-second before I reached it. I assumed mechanical explanation, slightly uneven surface, draft from the ventilation. I'm a physicist. I don't accept unexplained phenomena as evidence of something your framework can't accommodate." "Yes." "And now?" Chen looked at her hand again. "And now I deflected a live round traveling at 847 meters per second with my palm, and didn't feel it and didn't decide to do it." She paused. "My framework requires revision." Bo-Katan almost smiled. It was difficult to tell through the helmet, but the quality of her stillness changed. In a way Chen had learned to read over 6 months of joint operations. "Skywalker needs to know," Bo-Katan said. "The Jedi need to know. You're force-sensitive, emerging, not latent. That means it's developing on a timeline that isn't waiting for anyone's convenience." "What does that mean practically?" "It means the abilities will keep manifesting whether you train them or not. Untrained force sensitivity is like—" Bo-Katan paused, choosing the analogy. "You know how your cyber division keeps telling Republic intelligence that their encryption is inadequate because Earth's hackers approach problems without the assumptions baked into galactic doctrine? Yes. Untrained force sensitivity is the opposite of that. The ability is there, but without structure. It expresses randomly under emotional pressure in situations you can't predict or control. It makes you unpredictable, which in your current position means I'm a liability, means you're a variable nobody has planned for, including people who plan for variables professionally." Bo-Katan's helmet tilted slightly. "There's also the security consideration." Chen understood immediately. "Republic intelligence. They monitor all joint training exercises, 3 camera angles minimum. They would have flagged this inside 10 minutes of it happening. Bo-Katan moved to the door and checked the corridor. I need to transmit to Skywalker before Republic channels carry this to Coruscant, which means I have approximately, she checked her wrist display, 40 minutes before the lag differential makes the order of information irrelevant. What will Skywalker do? Try to help you, probably argue with Kenobi about it. Definitely make it more complicated than it needs to be. There was something in Bo-Katan's voice that was not quite affection but was adjacent to it. He has a pattern. And Kenobi? Will handle it correctly and be insufferable about it. Chen stood. The adrenaline of the incident had been processed and replaced by something that felt like the specific intellectual clarity that arrived when a problem you had been working around finally revealed its actual shape. The Force was real. She had known it was real since she watched Obi-Wan lift data pads across a UN chamber 6 months ago. But knowing something was real and discovering it was operating inside you were categorically different experiences. I want to understand it, she said. I know. Not just functionally, mechanically, how it interfaces with physical reality, what the energy transfer mechanism is, whether the Chen, yes, one thing at a time. Bo-Katan transmitted to Anakin. The transmission reached him aboard the Resolute during a tactical briefing about a separatist push in the Outer Rim, which Anakin was attending with approximately 30% of his attention because Rex had looked at him with a specific expression before the briefing started. The expression that meant something had come through channels that wasn't going to wait for the briefing to end. He read Bo-Katan's message under the table, read it twice, looked up at the holographic display showing separatist fleet movements, and understood nothing about it for approximately 15 seconds. A force sensitive on Earth, not latent, emerging. 3 months of low-level manifestation, followed by a live-fire deflection incident recorded by Republic intelligence monitoring equipment, which meant the information was already moving toward Coruscant through channels that terminated in Palpatine's office. He thought about what Palpatine did with information about Force sensitives who existed outside established structures. He thought about the conversation he'd had with Obi-Wan 6 months ago on Geneva's observation deck, about questions being healthy and certainty being dangerous, and about Padme being strong enough to face whatever came without needing to be protected from it. He thought about Earth, about what Earth had demonstrated consistently since the moment the Resolute dropped out of hyperspace into their solar system and found a planet full of humans who had never heard of the Force and didn't need it to refuse conquest. He sent 2 transmissions simultaneously. The first was to Obi-Wan, 4 words, "We have a problem." The second was to Bo-Katan, 11 words, "Keep her in the facility. I'm coming down tonight." Then he looked up at the briefing and said, "Can someone summarize the last 5 minutes?" with the tone of a man who had already decided that Outer Rim separatist fleet movements were, in the current moment, the least urgent thing in his immediate operational environment. Rex summarized the last 5 minutes without changing expression. Anakin listened with 40% of his attention, which was 30% more than before. The other 60% was working through the geometry of what Palpatine would do with the information currently traveling toward Coruscant. and how much time existed between now and the moment that information became an action. The answer, when he finished calculating, was, "Not much." The answer was, "Move now or don't bother moving." He looked at the holographic display showing separatist fleet positions and understood it perfectly and made 3 tactical recommendations that Rex implemented with the efficiency of someone who had spent 3 years learning to extract signal from the specific frequency of Anakin Skywalker, operating at partial attention. Then he stood, excused himself from the briefing, and went to find a stealth shuttle. He reached Geneva at 1900 local time. Chen was waiting in the same training room where the incident had occurred. The round was still on the floor. She had, as Bo-Katan predicted, retrieved it for spectroscopic analysis. The results were on her terminal, and she had been staring at them for 2 hours. Anakin looked at the readout, looked at Chen, looked at the round. "The molecular cohesion is intact," she said, before he could speak. The round wasn't physically altered by whatever stopped it, which means the energy transfer mechanism operated on the projectile's momentum rather than its material composition, which means it was the Force. I was getting there through established methodology. You were getting there through established methodology in a room where Republic intelligence is going to have an extraction team within. Anakin checked the time. 18 hours. Possibly less if Coruscant pushed the priority rating on the flag. Chen looked at him. The same quality of directness he had noticed 6 months ago when she had stood in a UN command center and proposed threatening mutual destruction with a calm that suggested she had already done the math on every alternative. "Tell me what that means," she said. Anakin told her, not the diplomatic version, not the version calibrated to manage her response. The complete version with the specific details about what Palpatine did with Force sensitives who represented variables he hadn't planned for, and what Republic intelligence's extraction protocols looked like in practice, and what the difference was between being identified as an asset and being identified as a problem. Chen listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "So my options," she said, "are formal Jedi training, which puts me inside Republic institutional structures that are currently compromised at the highest level, or remaining untrained, which makes me an unpredictable liability who can't control her own abilities. Or we do something the Jedi Council hasn't formally authorized and I train you myself," Anakin said. "Here, off the official record, using methods that are," he paused, "somewhat unorthodox by standard Jedi doctrine." "Define unorthodox." "I'd be teaching you what I actually know rather than what I was officially taught. There's a difference." Chen looked at the round on her terminal screen, looked at her hand, looked at Anakin with the expression of someone conducting a rapid and unsentimental cost-benefit analysis. "How long do we have before the extraction team arrives?" 18 hours, give or take." "Then we start now," Chen said. "And while we work, you explain to me exactly what inhibitor chips are and why your captain looked like someone had told him the war was rigged the morning I showed him the encryption files." Anakin sat down on an equipment crate. Outside the Geneva facility, the night was clear enough to see stars. Somewhere among them, a courier was carrying a classified transmission toward Coruscant. Somewhere else, a filmmaker was drinking coffee and hoping his 0340 transmission had reached the right frequency. And in a storage room that smelled of machine oil and Mandalorian weapon solvent, a Jedi who was learning to choose the light deliberately rather than by default began teaching a physicist to understand what she was already doing. Rex found the files on a Wednesday, not because he had been looking for them. That distinction mattered to him in the hours afterward, when he sat with what he had found and tried to understand what it required of him. He had not gone searching through encrypted Republic medical architecture with intent. He had been doing his job, specifically the part of his job that involved reviewing maintenance requests from the Resolute's medical bay, which had flagged an anomaly in the standard clone health monitoring system that the ship's medical droid couldn't explain through conventional diagnostics. The anomaly was a packet of encrypted data nested inside the baseline biometric monitoring protocol, small enough that it had been there for years without triggering inspection, just structured in a way that suggested it was designed not to be found during routine maintenance, but only by someone who was specifically and knowledgeably looking for it. Rex was not specifically and knowledgeably looking for it, but Rex had spent 3 years maintaining clone combat readiness across multiple campaigns, which meant he understood clone biology at a level that most Republic officers, including most clone officers, never needed to develop. He understood it because understanding it kept his men alive. And when something in his men's biology presented an anomaly he couldn't explain, he didn't route it to a medical droid and move on. He pulled the thread. It took him 4 hours. He was careful about the tools he used. Earth's Cyber Division had spent the last 6 months teaching Republic personnel what separatist surveillance architecture looked like from the inside. And one of the secondary lessons embedded in all of that instruction was what Republic surveillance architecture looked like from the inside. Chen had explained it once during a joint briefing, with the particular precision of someone describing a mechanism rather than making an accusation. Your own networks monitor your own personnel constantly. Most of what they collect goes unreviewed, but certain search patterns trigger automatic flags. The flags route to analysts. The analysts route to command. The lag time between trigger and human review is approximately 40 minutes on standard priority, 6 minutes on elevated. Rex had internalized this the way he internalized all tactical information, passively, completely filed away under the category of things that might matter later. He used Earth-derived proxy techniques for the entire 4 hours. What he found at the end of 4 hours was a device, not a metaphorical device, a physical one, embedded in the medical architecture of every clone trooper in the Grand Army of the Republic. A biochip seated at the base of the brainstem, integrated so thoroughly into standard clone physiology that it registered in medical scans as a normal biological structure. He found the schematics. He found the activation protocol. He found the command frequency. He found Order 66. Not as a rumor, not as a classified concept he had heard referenced obliquely in high-level briefings, as a mechanism, a precise, documented executable mechanism, a broadcast on a specific frequency, carrying a specific code that would trigger the chip, that would override higher cognitive function, that would turn every clone trooper in the galaxy into a weapon pointed at the Jedi Order in approximately 4 seconds flat. Rex sat with this for a long time. The Resolute moved through hyperspace around him, carrying 3,000 men whose skulls contained the same device. 3,000 men he had served alongside for 3 years. 3,000 men who trusted their orders because trusting orders was what they had been built to do, which was the point, which was the entire point, which was why the chip was there in the first place. He thought about Fives. Fives had found something. 2 years ago, during the conspiracy on Ringo Vinda, Fives had found something and tried to report it and been called unstable and been terminated before he could explain what he had found. Rex had been there, had watched it happen, had filed the memory under the category of things he didn't have enough information to assess, and moved on because moving on was also what he had been built to do. He understood now what Fives had found. He pulled up the Earth Cyber Division's encryption analysis files, which Chen had transmitted to him 6 weeks ago with the subject line "For your awareness, no action required at this time," which he now understood was Chen's way of telling him that action would eventually be required, and that she wanted him to have processing time before it was. The encryption patterns matched, so he cross-referenced the chip architecture against the separatist slicing techniques that Earth's team had reverse-engineered, found the same structural logic, centralized command, distributed execution, single point of activation, the same architecture that Earth's hackers had identified as the fundamental vulnerability in the separatist droid army, a system designed for total control that was, by the nature of that design, dependent on the integrity of the command source. If the command source was corrupted, the system failed. If the activation frequency was jammed or spoofed before the broadcast reached its targets, the chips couldn't fire. If the chips were removed, Rex stopped, looked at that possibility for a full minute, looked at the 3,000 men on this ship. He looked at the number in the Republic's military database, 3,400,216 clone troopers currently active across all theaters of the Clone Wars. He thought about what it would mean to remove chips from 3 million soldiers during an active war. The logistics, the medical infrastructure, the time, the near impossibility of doing it quietly enough that the person who had designed the system didn't notice and simply move the timeline up before the operation could be completed. He thought about what it would mean not to. He closed the encryption files, opened a new document and began writing. He wrote for 2 hours, everything he had found in the precise sequential documentation style that clone officers were trained to produce, not because he was filing a report, but because clarity mattered and because if something happened to him before this information reached the people who needed it, the document would need to stand on its own. When he finished, he had 17 pages. He looked at them, thought about who to transmit them to. He trusted Anakin, he trusted Obi-Wan, he trusted them both in the specific way you trusted people you had seen make hard choices correctly under conditions where making the choice incorrectly would have been easier and safer. That kind of trust was not abstract. It was built from specific evidence and it held under pressure. But transmitting to Anakin or Obi-Wan through any Republic channel meant the transmission moved through infrastructure that was, as of 6 hours ago when he had fully absorbed Earth's surveillance briefings, the infrastructure he could no longer treat as secure. He thought about Earth's cyber division. Specifically, he thought about the purple-haired hacker. Her name was Yuki, he had learned, and she had the particular quality of someone who found security architecture professionally offensive, who had explained proxy relay systems to him during a joint training session with the cheerful intensity of someone describing an elegant solution to an aesthetic problem. He sent Yuki a message through a channel she had given him unprompted 3 months ago, along with the note, "For when you need to send something that shouldn't travel on standard routes." The message was 4 words: "I need your help." Yuki responded in 6 minutes. 40 minutes after that, Rex's 17-page document was moving through 3 proxy relays, a frequency hop pattern, and a destination address that was not any official Republic comlink, but a secondary frequency on Obi-Wan's personal comm that Lucas had transmitted to Yuki's division 6 weeks ago through a channel that Republic intelligence had not yet identified. Rex sat back. The Resolute continued through hyperspace. 3,000 men went about their duties on the decks below him, running drills, running maintenance, eating in the mess, sleeping in rotating shifts, carrying in their skulls a device none of them knew was there that was designed to end them as individuals and convert them into a single-use instrument of someone else's political agenda. Rex thought about what it meant to be built for something. He had been built for war, built for loyalty, or built for the specific function of executing the Republic's military objectives with maximum efficiency and minimum independent judgment. He had been told at various points in his career by various officers with various levels of condescension that clones were most effective when they stopped thinking about context and focused on execution. He thought about Earth, about 8 billion humans who had looked at 2 galactic superpowers demanding submission and had said no, not because they had the power to enforce the no, but because the alternative was becoming something they didn't want to be. About the Secretary General standing in front of cameras and telling a galaxy of trillions that Earth would not go quietly, her voice carrying the specific quality of someone who had decided that who you were mattered more than whether you survived being who you were. Rex thought about whether that logic applied to clones, decided it did, decided specifically that it applied to him right now, in this moment, sitting in his quarters on a ship in hyperspace with 17 pages of documented evidence that the war he had been fighting for 3 years was designed to end with his own hand killing the people he had been ordered to protect. He opened a second document. This one was shorter. It was addressed to every clone trooper captain in every battalion he had a direct communication relationship with. 43 men spread across 12 active theaters. Men he had trained with, served alongside, none trusted in the specific way that only developed between people who had kept each other alive in circumstances where keeping each other alive was not guaranteed. He did not tell them everything, not yet. There wasn't time, and the risk of the message being intercepted scaled with its length and specificity. He told them 3 things: that there was a device in their heads, that he had documentation, that he needed them to hold what they knew quietly, follow their current orders without deviation, and wait for further contact through the channel he was about to give them. He gave them Yuki's channel. Then he sat back again and looked at the message for a long moment. Thought about what he was doing. Thought about the word treason, which was the word that applied to what he was doing by the Republic's legal framework. And thought about whether legal frameworks designed by people who had installed kill switches in your brain without your knowledge or consent retained moral authority over your behavior. Concluded that they did not. Sent the message. Then he stood, straightened his armor, and went back to work, because 3,000 men were his responsibility, and his responsibility didn't pause for the fact that the ground had just shifted permanently beneath everything he thought he understood about the war he was fighting. Obi-Wan received both transmissions within 40 minutes of each other. Lucas's vision first, then Rex's 17 pages. He sat in his quarters on the negotiator and read both documents completely, without moving, for an amount of time he did not track, because tracking time felt irrelevant against the scale of what he was holding. When he finished, he did something that was unusual for him. He sat in silence and felt the weight of it without immediately converting the weight into action. Lucas had described the moment, the room, the conversation, the specific words Palpatine used, and the gap they were designed to fill. And then the second version, the branch, the probability where someone arrived first, where Anakin walked into that room already knowing the shape of the trap. Rex had documented the mechanism that made the trap functional, the device that converted 3 million loyal soldiers into a single-use weapon the moment the trap closed. Together, the two transmissions described not a conspiracy theory, but an engineering blueprint, a system with inputs and outputs and a single critical moment where the entire architecture was vulnerable to disruption. Obi-Wan thought about what he had been avoiding thinking about for 3 years. He had known something was wrong, had known it at the level of Jedi intuition that the Force sometimes provided when the evidence wasn't yet visible. A wrongness in the shape of things, a sense that the war was moving according to a logic that didn't match the logic of any of its declared participants. He had raised concerns, had been careful, had watched Anakin carefully for signs of the attachment and darkness he feared. He had not looked at Palpatine. He understood now, sitting with Rex's document and Lucas's transmission, why he hadn't looked. Why it was the same reason the 41 senators in the classified session couldn't identify the moment they had agreed to anything, because the architecture was designed to be invisible to the people inside it, because looking required the specific combination of external perspective and internal access that no single person inside the Republic structure possessed. Earth had given him the external perspective. Lucas had given him the internal access. He stood, crossed to his communication terminal, composed a transmission to Anakin that was 11 words, which was 8 more than Anakin's 4-word message, but still far shorter than the situation technically warranted. Read everything Lucas sent. Read everything Rex sent. Come to me. Then he sat back down and thought about timing. The extraction team for Chen was 18 hours out. Palpatine's office had received the surveillance flag on the plasma deflection incident 6 hours ago. Lucas's transmission to the original channel had been identified 4 days ago, which meant the new channel had bought some time, but not infinite time. Order 66 was close, not because the war was ending, because Palpatine was accelerating. Earth had disrupted his timeline in ways that were still cascading through his calculations, and disrupted timelines made men like Palpatine move faster rather than slower. The Harvester threat had forced a ceasefire that cost him 6 months. The inhibitor chip intelligence was moving through clone command channels faster than he could have anticipated. Lucas's visions were reaching Kenobi through frequencies he hadn't mapped yet. The Palpatine was a man watching his architecture develop cracks. Men who had spent 30 years building architecture did not watch it develop cracks and wait to see what happened. Obi-Wan thought about Earth, about what Earth had taught the galaxy, about what happened when the people a plan was designed to use started asking questions before the plan reached its execution phase. He thought about Rex sitting alone in his quarters on the Resolute, writing 17 pages in the documentation style of someone who understood that clarity mattered more than comfort. He thought about Chen deflecting a live round without deciding to. He thought about Lucas at 0340 in Geneva, writing faster because there wasn't much time and the transmission needed to carry everything essential. He looked at the stars through the viewport. Then he did something he had not done in the 3 years since the Clone Wars began. Something he had been building toward without naming it, in every conversation with Anakin about attachment and choice, and the difference between fear and love. He composed a second transmission. This one was not to Anakin. It was to Master Yoda, and it contained everything. The extraction team arrived in 17 hours and 40 minutes. 20 minutes ahead of schedule, which Chen noted with the specific irritation of someone whose contingency planning had been calibrated to the original estimate. She filed the discrepancy away under the category of things that confirmed a lesson Earth had been learning repeatedly since first contact. Republic intelligence operated on timelines it did not share with the people those timelines affected. There were 6 of them. They came in a shuttle marked with Republic diplomatic credentials, which was either a genuine diplomatic cover or a demonstration that Republic intelligence understood Earth's monitoring systems well enough to know that diplomatic vessels received 40 seconds less scrutiny at the planetary approach perimeter than military ones. Chen suspected the latter. The 40-second differential was a detail from a briefing she had given 3 months ago to a joint security working group that had included 2 Republic intelligence liaisons. She had noted at the time that sharing Earth's security architecture with Republic liaisons carried inherent risk. She had shared it anyway because the alternative was appearing to have something to hide. And appearing to have something to hide was a worse tactical position than the risk of the information being used against you. She was now standing in the Geneva facility's main corridor, watching 6 people who had used that information against her and thinking about whether the original decision had been correct. She decided it had been. The logic still held even when the consequences were uncomfortable, especially when the consequences were uncomfortable. Anakin was standing to her left. He had arrived 11 minutes ago, which was 9 minutes after the facility's perimeter system flagged the diplomatic shuttle's approach vector. He had come from the training room where they had spent 4 hours working through the first principles of force sensitivity, which was less a formal lesson than a conversation between two people who approached problems from different directions and were discovering that the directions were more compatible than either had expected. He had brought Rex. Rex stood to Anakin's right, in armor that still bore Republic markings, but had been subtly modified in ways that Chen's eye wasn't trained to read. But Bo-Katan, arriving from the opposite corridor, clearly could, the Mandalorian's posture shifting slightly as she assessed the modifications and arrived at a conclusion she kept to herself. The extraction team's leader was a woman in her 40s. Dark hair, civilian clothing, the particular quality of stillness that Chen associated with people who had been trained to enter rooms without changing the room's atmosphere. She looked at Anakin with an expression that was professionally neutral and communicated beneath the professionalism that she had not expected him to be here and was recalculating. "General Skywalker," she said, "this is a Republic intelligence operation. Your presence is exactly as authorized as yours," Anakin said. His voice was pleasant. The pleasantness was the kind that communicated that pleasantness was a choice he was making deliberately and could stop making at any point. "Show me the Senate authorization for this extraction." "The authorization is classified at..." "Show me the classification level then." A pause. "General, because I've been on Earth for 6 months," Anakin continued in the same pleasant tone, "and in that time I've developed a fairly comprehensive understanding of what classified Republic operations in this system look like and what they're authorized by. And I've also developed separately a fairly comprehensive understanding of what operations that originate in the Chancellor's office, but don't carry Senate authorization look like." He tilted his head slightly. "They look like this." The team leader's stillness had a different quality now. The recalculation was more visible. "Dr. Chen is a person of interest in an active intelligence assessment," she said. "Her recent manifestation of potential force sensitivity in a non-Republic national represents a medical situation," Chen said. Everyone looked at her. She had not planned to speak. She had planned to let Anakin handle the political geometry while she observed and catalogued. But the phrase "person of interest in an active intelligence assessment" had produced in her a specific response that she recognized as anger and decided was appropriate to act on. "I'm a physicist," she said. "I had an involuntary physiological response to a stressful stimulus. That's a medical situation. If the Republic has medical protocols for this category of physiological response, and I'd be glad to review them with the appropriate medical personnel through appropriate channels." She paused. "What I won't do is board a Republic shuttle with 6 people who arrived 20 minutes ahead of a schedule they didn't share with me." The team leader looked at her with an expression that was reassessing several assumptions. "The schedule wasn't shared because sharing it would have given me time to prepare a response," Chen said. "Which is exactly the kind of decision pattern that tells me a great deal about the intent behind this operation." She looked at Anakin. "Am I correct that I have the right to refuse?" "You're on Earth," Anakin said. "Earth's sovereign territory. Republic intelligence has no jurisdictional authority here, without Earth government authorization. Which you don't have, Bo-Katan observed from the corridor entrance. She had not moved from the doorway, but her presence had changed the room's geometry in the way that armed people in doorways tended to do. I checked when you landed. The team leader looked at the four of them, did the calculation. We'll need to contact Coruscant, she said. Please do, Anakin said. Use the diplomatic channel, it's the most reliable. Another pleasant pause. I'll wait. They waited 40 minutes. During those 40 minutes, Chen watched Anakin with the focused attention she normally directed at phenomena she was trying to understand. He stood in the corridor with the team leader at a distance of approximately 4 meters and said nothing. I did not appear tense, did not appear relaxed, appeared specifically like someone who had decided what he was doing and was doing it without requiring the process to feel comfortable. She had seen this quality in exactly 2 other people since first contact. Rex, when he had read the encryption files and said nothing for 90 seconds, and then said, I see, with the particular weight of someone who had just reorganized everything they understood about their situation. And the Secretary General, the night of Tarkin's ultimatum, when she had looked at the holographic displays showing 2 fleets repositioning for a joint blockade, and made the decision to broadcast everything on open frequencies, with the calm of someone who had calculated that the worst outcome of transparency was still better than the best outcome of compliant silence. The transmission from Coruscant came back in 38 minutes. The team leader listened to it through an earpiece. Her expression did not change during the transmission. When it finished, she looked at Anakin with something that Chen could not read precisely, but which contained, she thought, a component of relief alongside the professional neutrality. The operation is suspended pending Senate review, the team leader said. Thank you, Anakin said. General Skywalker, she paused. I want you to understand that I'm carrying out my orders. What those orders are authorized by is above my operational level. I know, Anakin said. The pleasantness was gone, replaced by something simpler. I'm not angry at you. She looked at him for a moment. Then she turned and led her team back toward the shuttle. The room was quiet after they left. Bo-Katan moved from the doorway. Rex checked his comlink. Chen looked at Anakin and found him looking at the corridor where the team had gone with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not the tactical assessment face, not the pleasant as a choice face, not the face he used when I was managing a situation. Something more direct than any of those. That bought us time, Rex said. Not much. Enough, Anakin said. Enough for what? Chen asked. Anakin turned to face her. I got a transmission from Obi-Wan 2 hours ago, he said. And before that, one from Lucas. He looked at Rex. And I know you sent the document because Kenobi forwarded it and I recognized the formatting. Rex said nothing. Lucas described the conversation. Anakin continued. The one Palpatine is going to try to have with me. He described both versions of it. The one where I don't know it's coming, and the one where I do. He paused. I've been thinking about what the difference is between the 2 versions. What did you conclude? Bo-Katan asked. That the version where I know it's coming only works if I've already done something the other version didn't do. He looked at Chen. In the version where I fall, I've been carrying the fear alone. Palpatine becomes the first person who knows I'm carrying it, which means He owns it. He can do whatever he wants with something he's the only one holding. Chen thought about the transmission she had received from Lucas 3 weeks ago, forwarded through Yuki's channel. The detailed breakdown of Anakin's psychology from a filmmaker who had spent 20 years thinking he was writing fiction and was now understanding he had been doing something else. "And in the second version," she asked, "someone got there first." Anakin sat down on a crate, not the careful, controlled sitting of someone managing their presentation, the sitting down of someone who was tired and was letting the tiredness be visible. Obi-Wan's message said, "Come to me." He knows, not just about the chips, about Palpatine, about what's been built, about where it ends. He looked at his hands. He's known something was wrong for years. I think he was afraid to see how wrong. "That's familiar," Rex said quietly. Anakin looked up at him. "I knew Fives found something," Rex said. "Filed it under insufficient information. Moved on." He paused. It was sufficient information. I just didn't want to know what it was sufficient for." The corridor was quiet for a moment. Outside, the diplomatic shuttle lifted from the landing pad. Chen tracked it through the facility's perimeter system on her wrist display, watched it clear the atmosphere, watched its transponder signal move toward the Republic fleet positioned at the system's edge. "They'll report back," she said. "Palpatine will know the operation was suspended. He'll know you were here." "Yes," Anakin said, which changes his timeline. "Yes." "How much time do we have before he moves Order 66 forward?" Anakin was quiet for a moment, not the tactical calculation quiet, the honest assessment quiet. Lucas said weeks, possibly days, in the transmission from 0340, he said. That was 2 days ago. He looked at Rex. How far has the document traveled?" 43 captains, Rex said. 12 theaters, all holding. "Chen, can Yuki jam the activation frequency?" Chen thought about it, about the chip architecture Rex had documented, about the centralized command logic Earth's cyber division had reverse-engineered from separatist systems, about the conversation she had with Yuki 2 days ago, when she had walked her through the encryption structure, and Yuki had looked at it for 4 minutes and said, with the aesthetic offense that characterized her response to all inadequate security design, "This is embarrassingly jammable." "Yes," Chen said, "locally. We can cover this system completely, beyond this system." She paused. "We'd need relay infrastructure, Republic relay infrastructure." "Kenobi's working on that," Anakin said. He transmitted to Yoda. Bo-Katan made a sound that was not quite a word, but communicated a complete assessment. "The Jedi Council," she said. "If Yoda moves, the Council moves," Anakin said. "And if the Council moves with what Kenobi sent them..." "Palpatine accelerates," Rex said. "Palpatine accelerates," Anakin confirmed, "which is why we're not waiting for the Council." He stood. The tiredness was still there, but it had been reorganized into something functional. Chen recognized the reorganization. She had seen it in herself the morning after the Harvester attack, when the exhaustion of surviving something terrible converted into the specific energy of someone who understood exactly what needed to be done and was going to do it. "We have 3 tasks," Anakin said. "Yuki covers this system's activation frequency. Rex gets the document to every clone captain he hasn't reached yet. and I go to Obi-Wan." He looked at each of them, not to report, to have the conversation Lucas described, the one that puts someone in the room with the fear before Palpatine gets there. "And me?" Bo-Katan asked. "You protect Lucas," Anakin said. "Palpatine knows he's been transmitting. The original channel was burned 4 days ago. The new one has maybe 72 hours before intelligence maps it." He paused. "Lucas is the variable Palpatine least understands, which makes him the most exposed." Bo-Katan nodded once, the economical nod of someone who had already accepted the assignment before it was offered. "One more thing," Chen said. They looked at her. "The extraction team was suspended because the authorization didn't hold under scrutiny," she said. "Which means Palpatine either moved faster than his own authorization infrastructure could support, or he's operating outside it entirely." She looked at Anakin. "Either way, the suspension won't last. The next team won't come through diplomatic channels." "I know," Anakin said. "I'm not leaving Earth," she said. It was not a declaration. It was a statement of established fact delivered to prevent misunderstanding. "Whatever's coming, I'm not leaving." Anakin looked at her for a moment, looked at the training room where they had spent 4 hours that morning and where a live round was still sitting on a shelf next to a spectroscopic analysis printout that described a force interaction in the precise language of particle physics. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm leaving you with Bo-Katan instead of Rex." Bo-Katan made the sound again. This time it was identifiably the sound of someone accepting a compliment they found slightly excessive but were choosing not to argue with. Rex checked his comlink. 43 captains, 12 theaters, all holding. The diplomatic shuttle's transponder signal reached the fleet perimeter and disappeared into Republic infrastructure. Somewhere in that infrastructure, a report was moving toward Coruscant. Somewhere in Coruscant, in an office with simple furniture and deliberately intimate lighting, a man who had spent 30 years building architecture was reading the report and understanding that the architecture had developed a crack he had not planned for. Not a small crack, the kind that started at the foundation. Earth had stopped being a planet 6 months ago, not physically. It still rotated. It still carried 8 billion people through their days, eating, working, arguing about politics that felt both smaller and more urgent than they had before the Resolute dropped out of hyperspace and changed the definition of what the word alone meant. But it had stopped being just a planet. It had become something the galaxy didn't have adequate language for. Not a Republic member world, not a separatist protectorate, not neutral in any way that neutrality had previously been defined, because neutrality implied standing apart from a conflict, and Earth had not stood apart from anything since the moment it refused to. It had become the place where the Clone Wars' hidden logic was being named out loud. Rex's document was moving through clone command channels on frequencies Palpatine hadn't mapped. Lucas's visions were moving through proxy relays toward a Jedi Master who had spent 900 years learning to read what the Force was trying to say. Chen was sitting in a Geneva training room teaching herself to understand what she was already doing, with a Mandalorian in Beskar armor standing at the door and finding the arrangement entirely reasonable. And Anakin Skywalker was on a shuttle heading toward a conversation that had 2 versions. He knew which version he was choosing. He had known since the morning after the Harvester attack, standing on Earth's surface, looking at a sky with one sun, watching 8 billion people get up and go about their lives with the specific quality of people who understood that the universe had just become considerably more dangerous and had decided to exist in it anyway. Not because the fear was gone, because they had looked at the fear directly and decided it wasn't going to drive. Palpatine was accelerating. The architecture he had spent 30 years building was developing cracks at the foundation, and men who built architecture did not watch it crack without responding. The next move was coming. It was close. Days, not weeks, in the probability space Lucas had described at 0340 in Geneva, with shaking hands and 12 pages of handwriting. But for the first time in 3 years, the Republic's most dangerous variable was not operating alone with his fear in a room where only one person knew what he was carrying. Someone had gotten there first. The galaxy was watching Earth. Earth, for once, was watching back.